Did you know that Mexico is now one of the top 15 economies in the world? This lively nation is finally stepping into the spotlight as an escalating economic powerhouse. One key advantage is its strategic location next to the United States, facilitating strong trade relations and economic ties. In recent years, Mexico has become one of America's top trading partners, with billions of dollars exchanging goods and services annually. But what exactly is driving this transformation? In this video, we'll explore the dynamic forces propelling Mexico's economic growth, from strategic reforms and booming industries to foreign investments. If you haven't subscribed to our channel, subscribe now for more interesting videos. By examining the quarterly economic activity from 2023, particularly in the established northern regions and the rapidly growing southern areas like Oaxaca and Tabasco, it's clear that Mexico is experiencing significant economic growth. This surge is largely attributed to a phenomenon known as nearshoring, the practice of relocating business operations to a nearby country rather than one further away. This trend is gaining momentum as American, European, and Asian companies shift their operations to Mexico. As a result, foreign investment has poured into Mexico, making 2023 a record-breaking year with an 18% year-over-year growth in foreign investments. This trend is set to continue due to escalating global tensions, particularly between the United States and China, and increasing trade wars and tariffs. These factors have made manufacturing in China less appealing for American and European companies who are now focusing on Mexico, conveniently located just across the southern border. While Mexico is not projected to surpass China as the world's leading global exporter, it still presents a significant growth opportunity. Remarkably, in February 2024, Mexico surpassed China as the leading source of imports for the U.S. This milestone has further fueled Mexico's economic expansion, making it one of the fastest growing economies among the G20 in 2023. This growth is also reflected in the record pace of wage increases across the country. But this is not the actual and core reasons of Mexico's wealth. So what is? To understand Mexico's wealth, we have to go a little back in time. Since the colonial era, Mexico's economy has been characterized by resource extraction. Mexico is finally advancing towards becoming a developed and wealthy nation. As a vast country with abundant natural resources, Mexico is rich in silver and other minerals, which have attracted significant investment in mining. However, the most pivotal event in the development of Mexico's economy was the discovery of large oil fields in the early 20th century. The discovery of the 𝗔𝗕𝗢𝗨𝗧 field in 1916 was particularly noteworthy. While people knew there was oil in the Gulf of Mexico, the extent of its abundance was unknown. At its peak, this field was the most productive in the world, producing over 260,000 barrels of oil per day. These discoveries propelled Mexico to become one of the world's leading oil producers in the early 20th century, profoundly impacting its economic development over subsequent decades. Exporting oil allowed Mexico to generate significant revenue, especially during periods of high oil prices. Initially, private companies undertook development and drilling, but this created tension with the Mexican government, which eventually nationalized the industry. Pemex, the state-owned oil company, was created in 1938, and since then, the exploration, extraction, and sale of natural gas and petroleum have been managed by the state. Pemex's revenue have historically contributed significantly to government income, accounting for around 30 to 40% of total physical revenues. Following the worldwide Great Depression of the late 1920s and 1930s, Mexico's economy began to grow steadily, and by 1950, the country seemed poised for an economic takeoff, which occurred during the period known as the Mexican economic miracle. During this time, more workers migrated to cities, manufacturing increased its share of GDP, agricultural production declined, and education spread rapidly, boosting literacy rate. Between 1950 and 1981, Mexico's real GDP grew by 6.5% annually. Despite a high rate of population growth, real GDP per working age person grew by 3.6%. During this boom period, the government heavily invested in healthcare, education, and infrastructure, significantly improving citizens' lives. Hopes for further growth were boosted in 1977 when new oil field discoveries increased Mexico's proven oil reserves by 151%. This led the government to expand public expenditure, fully satisfying the demand for elementary and preschool education for the first time in the country's history. However, the 1980s brought significant challenges for Mexico. The use of oil revenues, which had been a blessing for so long, quickly became a curse. During the high oil prices of the 1970s, Mexico generated substantial export revenues and borrowed heavily to fund its public sector expansion program. Consequently, Consequently, foreign debt soared from $4.3 billion in 1970 to $58.9 billion in 1982. However, a rapid fall in oil prices at the end of 1970s caused a surplus oil of the global market, led to a significant drop in Mexico's export revenues. Spending remained relatively unchanged, causing a public deficit of 17.6%. Mexico and other oil-producing Latin American nations could no longer meet their debt payments, leading the Mexican government to default on its loan payments in 1982, triggering the 1982 debt crisis. Following the oil price crash of the late 1970s, Mexico's economy eventually rebounded, benefiting significantly from the commodity supercycle of the late 1990s and early 2000s. During this period, most commodities experienced double-digit annual real price growth, which helped Mexico's economy recover. Today, oil remains a crucial component of the Mexican economy, accounting for around 20% of government revenues. However, moving away from oil as a primary source of economic growth has long been a goal of the Mexican government, and this shift began taking shape in the 1990s through several key initiatives. In 1994, Mexico entered the North American Free Trade Agreement, NAFTA, with Canada and the United States. This agreement allowed for free trade between the three countries, reducing tariffs on most goods and services and eliminating many barriers to cross-border investment. As a result, Mexico's exports boomed, doubling as a share of GDP to 41% from 1994 to 2021. During this period, the value of Mexico's exports in constant dollars rose more than fourfold to $465 billion, a pace comparable to countries like Thailand and Malaysia. Mexico also significantly diversified its exports during this time, shifting focus from agricultural goods and oil to more labor-intensive manufactured goods like electronics and auto parts. The manufacturing industry, in particular, saw significant growth, bolstered by foreign direct investment, FDI, driven by NAFTA. This influx of investment allowed Mexico to modernize its operations and create many new jobs, providing a viable source of income for many Mexicans and drawing more workers to formal employment. These jobs often require higher skill levels than traditional agriculture or low-skilled jobs, encouraging workers to seek higher education and vocational training, thereby improving their earning potential. Even though NAFTA has since been replaced by the United States-Mexico-Canada Agreement, USMCA, the reduction of tariffs and trade barriers, coupled with Mexico's proximity to the world's largest economy, has led to a surge in investment, particularly FDI. These investment flows are estimated to be around 60% higher than they would be without the agreement. Many American companies have moved parts of their operations to Mexico to establish production centers and lower costs, benefiting the Mexican economy significantly. The USMCA also places requirements for certain percentage of goods to be made in North America to be tariff-free. For example, 75% of an automobile's components must be made in North America. This has led to a rise in assembly plants across Mexico, where products can be labeled "Made in Mexico" to lower costs. Such an influx of investment in manufacturing is likely to have a multiplier effect across the economy, increasing spending in other areas like infrastructure and telecommunications, further bolstering Mexico's economic growth. Mexico's productivity is facing a significant challenge due to its large informal sector. Unlike modern developed economies, which are typically comprised of formal businesses registered with the government, Mexico's informal economy consists mainly of small businesses that are not taxed or regulated. This sector accounts for a staggering 24% of Mexico's GDP and 55% of its employment. Workers in this sector lack benefits such as health care and pensions, and informal firms being off the books generally cannot access bank loans. This not only limits their growth, but also significantly reduces government tax revenues. This issue ties into the broader problem of poor access to loans and credit, which is a severe limiting factor for Mexico's growth. Despite extensive banking reforms following the financial crash in the 1990s, Mexico's financial sector remains notable for its low levels of credit extended to firms and households. In the 20th century, domestic credit to the private sector as a share of GDP averaged just 24%, compared to 99% in Chile, 51% in Brazil, and 131% in South Korea. Such a low rate of credit hampers production, capital formation, and innovation, which are crucial for generating economic growth. Nonetheless, Mexico's proximity to the world's largest economy gives it a strategic advantage, especially deglobalization and a shift away from China continues. Unlike some European economies, Mexico has a young and growing demographic, with more people entering the workforce, and it does not face the same burden of large welfare payments for healthcare and pensions. The country's growth is expected to continue as nearshoring becomes a more prominent phenomenon worldwide. To ensure sustainable growth, Mexico must effectively use the influx of investment and capital to build long-term economic capacity and reduce inequality, rather than squandering their resources. This approach will be crucial in securing a prosperous future for the nation. If you haven't subscribed to our channel, subscribe now so you don't miss any of our exciting videos.